Welcome to Bite at a Time Books, where we read you your favorite classics one bite at a time. My name is Bree Carlile, and I love to read and wanted to share my passion with listeners like you. You can sign up for our newsletter at biteatatimebooks.com. You'll also find our new t-shirts in the shop, including podcast shirts and quote shirts from your favorite classic novels. Be sure to follow my show on your favorite podcast platform so you get all the new episodes. We're part of the Bite at a Time Books Productions Network. If you'd also like to hear what inspired your favorite classic author to write their novels, and what was going on in the world at the time, check out the Bite at a Time Books Behind the Story podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts. Today we'll be continuing Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. Chapter 4. Beginning of a Great Malady. On the following day, at the accustomed hour, Marius drew from his wardrobe his new coat, his new trousers, his new hat, and his new boots. He clothed himself in this complete panoply, put on his gloves, a tremendous luxury, and set off for the Luxembourg. On the way thither, he encountered Courfeyrac, and pretended not to see him. Courfeyrac, on his return home, said to his friends, "I have just met Marius's new hat and new coat with Marius inside them. He was going to pass an examination, no doubt. He looked utterly stupid." On arriving at the Luxembourg, Marius made the tour of the fountain basin and stared at the swans. Then he remained for a long time in contemplation before a statue whose head was perfectly black with mold, and one of whose hips was missing. Near the basin there was a bourgeois 40 years of age, with a prominent stomach, who was holding by the hand of a little urchin of 5 and saying to him, "Shun excess, my son. Keep at an equal distance from despotism and from anarchy." Marius listened to this bourgeois. Then he made the circuit of the basin once more. At last, he directed his course towards his alley, slowly and as if with regret. One would have said that he was both forced to go there and withheld from doing so. He did not perceive it himself and thought that he was doing as he always did. On turning into the walk, he saw Monsieur Leblanc and the young girl on the other end, on their bench. He buttoned his coat up to the very top, pulled it down on his body so that there might be no wrinkles, examined, with a certain complacence, the lustrous gleams of his trousers, and marched on the bench. This march savored of an attack, and certainly of a desire for conquest. So I say that he marched on the bench as I should say Hannibal marched on Rome. However, all its movements were purely mechanical, and he had interrupted none of the habitual preoccupations of his mind and labors. At that moment, he was thinking that the Manuel du Baccalaureate was a stupid book, and that it must have been drawn up by rare idiots to allow of 3 tragedies of Racine and only 1 comedy of Molière, being analyzed therein as masterpieces of the human mind. There was a piercing whistling going on in his ears. As he approached the bench, he held fast to the folds in his coat and fixed his eyes on the young girl. It seemed to him that she filled the entire extremity of the alley with a vague blue light. In proportion as he drew near, his pace slackened more and more. On arriving at some little distance from the bench, and long before he had reached the end of the walk, he halted, and could not explain to himself why he retraced his steps. He did not even say to himself that he would not go as far as the end. It was only with difficulty that the young girl could have perceived him in the distance and noted his fine appearance and his new clothes. Nevertheless, he held himself very erect, in case anyone should be looking at him from behind. He attained the opposite end, then came back, and this time he approached a little nearer to the bench. He even got to within 3 intervals of trees. But there he felt an indescribable impossibility of proceeding further, and he hesitated. He thought he saw the young girl's face bending towards him, but he exerted a manly and violent effort, subdued his hesitation, and walked straight ahead. A few seconds later, he rushed in front of the bench, erect and firm, reddening to the very ears, without daring to cast a glance either to the right or to the left, with his hand thrust into his coat like a statesman. At the moment when he passed, under the cannon of the place, he felt his heart beat wildly. As on the preceding day, she wore her damask gown and her crepe bonnet. He heard an ineffable voice, which must have been her voice. She was talking tranquilly. She was very pretty. He felt it, although he made no attempt to see her. She could not, however, he thought, help feeling esteem and consideration for me, if she only knew that I am the veritable author of the dissertation on Marcos Brennan de la Ronde, which Monsieur Francois de Neufchâteau put, as though it were his own, at the head of his edition of Gil Blas. He went beyond the bench as far as the extremity of the walk, which was very near, then turned on his heel and passed once more in front of the lovely girl. This time he was very pale. Moreover, all his emotions were disagreeable. As he went further from the bench and the young girl, and while his back was turned to her, he fancied that she was gazing after him. And that made him stumble. He did not attempt to approach the bench again. He halted near the middle of the walk, and there, a thing which he never did, he sat down, and reflecting in the most profoundly indistinct depths of his spirit that after all it was hard that persons whose white bonnet and black gown he admired should be absolutely insensible to his splendid trousers and his new coat. At the expiration of a quarter of an hour he rose, as though he were on the point of again beginning his march towards that bench which was surrounded by an aureole. But he remained standing there, motionless. For the first time in 15 months, he said to himself that that gentleman who sat there every day with his daughter had on his side noticed him and probably considered his assiduity singular. For the first time also, he was conscious of some irreverence in designating that stranger, even in his thoughts, by the sobriquet of Monsieur Leblanc. He stood thus for several minutes, with drooping head, tracing figures in the sand with the cane which he held in his hand. Then he turned abruptly in the direction opposite to the bench, to Monsieur Leblanc and his daughter, and went home. That day, he forgot to dine. At 8 o'clock in the evening, he perceived this fact, and as it was too late to go down to the Rue Saint-Jacques, he said, "Never mind," and ate a bit of bread. He did not go to bed until he had brushed his coat and folded it up with great care. Thank you for joining Bite at a Time Books today, while we read a bite of one of your favorite classics. Again, my name is Bree Carlile, and I hope you come back tomorrow for the next bite of Les Miserables. Don't forget, you can sign up for our newsletter at biteatatimebooks.com. And while you're there, check out our t-shirt shop. You can look in the show notes or on our website, biteatatimebooks.com, for the rest of the links for our show. We'd love to hear from you on social media. You can find us everywhere at Bite at a Time Books.